Right, we're going to look at the skeletal system today. So our learning objectives are all pupils develop an understanding of the skeleton and joints. And by the end of the lesson, you should be able to answer a number of exam-style questions. Now, within the skeleton, it has four main functions, but often we get mixed up and we sort of say five. So the first one is movement. Without the skeleton, you won't be able to move. The key one is when we look at it, we look at our skeleton provides all types of movement. Our movement happens at all of our joints, so such as your elbow, your shoulder, your neck, your fingers. Every joint produces a type of movement, which we'll go into a bit more detail later. The next one is protection. Now, all your vital organs are protected. Now, if you think of your heart, you think of your lungs, they are protected by your rib cage here. So if you didn't have your rib cage and someone poked you in the stomach, they'd be touching your heart, and that could end up killing you. So that is vitally important that that rib cage protects your vital organs. Now, if you also think what other major organs it protects, actually your brain, if you think of your cranium, actually protects your brain. So if anyone touches your head, it means they will be touching directly your brain. Now, if you think of in sporting context, well, why would you need that cranium? If you think of heading a football, if you think of being tackled in rugby, where someone goes into the ribs, that the skeletal system really provides that protection of all vital organs. Now the next one is support. Your skeleton gives you that structure. My shoulders are this wide because my skeleton is this wide. I am this tall because my skeleton is this tall. So your skeleton gives you your support and your shape. And you can't change that. You can add layers of fat or layers of muscle to change your shape, but your skeleton system stays the same. The last one is blood production, but you also can say mineral storage as well. Now with blood production, your red and white blood cells are produced in your bone marrow. And that's inside all large bones. You can actually see down here. So if we're looking at all large bones, all large bones here produce your red blood cells and white blood cells in your bone marrow. So really, for exams, it is memorising the four facts. So when it functions as a skeleton, we look at our movement, our protection, our support, our blood production, but you also can add mineral storage as well. That's something very important to remember. Now, within the body, our bones have different classifications. So we don't just have a big long list of names, we actually break them into different classifications. So the first one is our long bones. Now if you think, well, what are long bones? They're ones in your arms, in your legs, anything where the bones are long. So there, really, one of the names is the humerus, is the bone along here, which is a long bone. Okay, we think of our femur, which is in our thigh. So we need, with this, for GCSE questions, we need to be able to have the four classifications, and we need to be able to give examples of a long bone. The next one is short. So you're looking at things such as your fingers are short bones. So we actually call these the phalanges. So we're actually then looking to be able to once again say short bone and phalanges as the answer. The next one is the flat bones. Now flat bones, you might think, what's that? Flat bones could be in the cranium, if you think they're flat. Or we go the scapula, which is in the shoulder here. The bone is flat and smooth. The last one is the irregular bones. This is different types of shapes. The irregular bones is really the vertebrae column. So that's your spinal cord that runs down the back. So with this, when you look at your irregular bones, you look at vertebrae. So an exam style question could be, can you name the four classifications of bone and can you give an example? So it's thinking of long bones, humerus, short bones, phalanges. Also, it may have a question such as the humerus is a long bone. Can you give me another example? So it's always good to remember a couple of different examples. Now, this is just a picture of a skeleton, okay? And these are the major bones in the skeleton we need to remember. Okay, so with this is what we'll be trying to do is taking off the different labels and you being able to label it yourself. So if we look around the key ones, we've sort of got the cranium. Okay, a lot of people put skull and end up getting it marked wrong. Okay, always important ones is humerus and your upper arm, which usually comes up. People get the radius and ulna mixed up, which are in your forearm. We also get the tibia and fibia in your lower legs mixed up. Now, there has been a lot of questions lately where it talks about the metacarpals, asking what they are, the phalanges. Also, people get mixed up with the metatarsals and also the phalanges, which are also your toes. So it's making sure we remember these and we don't get them mixed up. We have had questions in the past which talks about what the bone in the middle of the ribs called, which is sternum. We talk about the breastbone coming down here in the middle of the body, and obviously the ribs. Now these are the major ones. There has been questions in the past talking about when tackling in rugby, which bones could become hurt. Now with this, we can also talk about the humerus, but one of the other ones is the clavicle. So people used to call it the collarbone, which is just here. Okay, but it's the clavicle. So it's really remembering all these different types of bones and being able to relate them is, are they long, are they short, and the jobs they do as well. So you might be thinking, well, the ribs, we're thinking, well, they're one of the protection of your vital organs. Cranium, protection of vital organs. Okay, humerus, fibia, production of red and white blood cells in the bone marrow. So, a couple of little questions, so you can pause the video. Question 1. How does the body move? How the body moves. State 4 functions of the skeleton. So pause to see if you can answer that question. Once you've done that one, name the 4 types of bones and give an example of each one. And that should be 4 marks, not 2. Right, so now look at the vertebral column. So the vertebral column is your spinal cord, what runs from the bottom of your cranium all the way through to basically your bum. Okay, so it's split into different areas. Okay, the first one is the cervical. Okay, that is the smallest vertebrae. It supports your head and your neck. So right at the top here. Okay, and it allows your head to nod, move side to side. So it gives you a bit of movement. The next one is your thoracic. Okay, and the ribs are attached to this. So it all comes here and your ribs are all attached to it. Okay, and that's the real, gives you that protective cage around your vital organs. It allows some movement, okay, bending forward, moving backwards, moving side to side. The next one is the lumbar. Lumbar is the largest vertebrae, okay, and this gives you the most range of movement. Just here, most range of movement. Allows you to be a lot more flexible, so bending forward, bending back, moving side to side. Now, because it is the largest area and offers the largest range of movement, that's the one where you go, oh, I've got a bad back, it's hurting. That's the one that usually gets injured more because that's the one that can move more. Now we've got 3 more. Okay, sorry, 2 more. The sacrum, which is there. Okay. And bones at the sacrum vertebrae are fused together, so these don't move. Okay, so don't offer you really any range of movement. Okay, but they make a strong base, and that's basically if you jump, that's where, and the force comes through that part of the spine, which really protects the rest of it. And the last one is the coccyx. Once again, that is also fused, and like the tailbone. If you ever fell over and you banged sort of your coccyx on the floor, bottom of your bum, and it really, really hurts, that's the coccyx right at the bottom, just here. Okay, you can see that how the spine is made up into its different sections. And for part of your exam, you actually need to know these different sections. So you could have something as a spinal cord, which is shown here, and you might have to label it. It may give you the thoracic is the largest part of the spinal column. Can you name 2 others? So it's really thinking about, well, if I know all 5, if I know what order in, I know which one offers me the most movement, I know which one is fused together. So at that point, I can answer pretty much any question when it comes up on the spine. Now the spine is made up, say it's irregular. Now, if you can sort of see in this diagram here that each one is a different layer. So it's actually sort of like a layer there, and the next vertebrae is there, the next vertebrae is there, the next vertebrae there. Okay, and they've done like this, and they have little bits of cartilage in between. So when you actually fall and hurt, it acts as a shock absorber. Now, if you had a big long spine which wasn't fused together, it was just one straight line, any force would generate all the way through it. Now, it has this designed as lots of different layers. If you jump or fall, it doesn't go all the way up your spine and hurt you. So it's really good design. Now, the next section is synovial joints. Now, synovial joints are any joint that moves. Now, a lot of people get this mixed up. In the exam question, it could be, can you name a synovial joint? And you hear the word synovial and you just get it wrong. You think, what is it? I don't know what a synovial joint is. Now, once you've learned the different names of joints, it is a very easy question. You've just got to remember that all synovial joints are freely movable. So they're things such as your arm, I can move at my elbow. Yeah, my neck, I can move my head. My knee, I can move. My shoulders, I can move. Yeah, anywhere joint that provides a movement is a synovial joint. Now, a joint is where two bones, one here and one here, actually come together. So, as two bones come together, if they were just pushed together, they would end up rubbing together and it cause a lot of pain. So the body actually puts in a layer just here of cartilage. Now, cartilage, if you think, it's just a type of sponge. Okay, if you think, if I have my hands together, if I rub them together, it really, really hurts. But if I actually get a layer of sponge and rub them together, that stops the friction. It stops them rubbing together. It stops them hurting. So that cartilage is vitally important, and it is just a layer of sponge. Now, that sponge in our body, if it was dry, it would start to wear out and it wouldn't be as good. So we actually make sure this piece of sponge is wet. So we have that, and it's called synovial fluid. So once again, synovial, freely movable joint, and all we're adding on is fluid. Okay, so synovial fluid makes that piece of cartilage nice and wet in order to aid it being a shock absorber, to aid it from rubbing together. And that's in every single joint. Okay, we also have a synovial membrane. Now that is just a piece around the outside of the joint. Okay, and the joint capsule as well, which sort of goes all the way around. Okay, which encloses the joint. Now, if you can see here, I'll just change colour. This part here, go around the outside, and this here, that there is something called a ligament. Now, a ligament holds bones together. Okay, so you have a ligament which is attached to this bone here and attached to this bone here, and if they become unattached, the bones drift apart. So these ligaments hold these bones in place. Okay, they can be stretched because obviously our bones move, so it's not fixed in place and you can't move them. It allow movement, okay, but obviously it doesn't allow it to bend too much. Okay, but that holds the bones to bones. So in questions in the exams, could be what is the role of a ligament? Okay, it could be what holds bones to bones. Now people get this mixed up with a tendon. So when we come on to muscles, a tendon holds bone to muscle. So we need to make sure we don't get these two mixed up, but when we come on to muscles one, you can see that as well. Now looking at our synovial joints, okay, we've just talked about this. Cartilage reduces friction and acts as that shock absorber. Synovial fluid lubricates the joint. The synovial membrane produces synovial fluid. Tendons join muscle to bone, which we've just talked about, and ligaments, which we talked about in more detail, join bone to bone. So we need to make sure we don't get these two mixed up. That's a very easy mark to give away. Now, looking at our different types of joints. Now, the first one we can look at is the ball and socket joint. Now, this is your hip and your shoulder. If you think you have quite a lot of movement in your hip and shoulder, you can actually see here that there is the ball, okay, and that's plugged into your socket just here, okay. So that goes in. If you think of your hand is the socket, your fist is the ball, and that goes in, and that then can offer a free range of movement. Now you have this in your hip and in your shoulder. Now you can see here a question may be, name the bone, the ball and socket joint in your hip. So you've got the femur, makes up the bone here, and we've got the pelvis, which makes up the bone here. So once again, knowing those names of bones are vitally important, because you can know what a ball and socket is, you could explain it. If you can't remember the two types of bone, at that point, you're going to lose marks. So really important, we remember bones, and remember that a ball and socket is in the shoulder and it's in the hip, and it offers the greatest range of movement. Now the next one is a hinge joint. Now if you think of a door, so this is our door here, okay, think of a door opens and it closes. It doesn't move any other way, it doesn't move up, doesn't move down. A door open, it closes. Now the hinge joint does exactly the same. It moves up, it moves down, that's it. So if you think of your elbow is a hinge joint, my arm can move up at the elbow, move down at the elbow. My elbow does not move side to side. This is where you do this, but that movement is being produced by my ball and socket joint in my shoulder. The actual elbow movement is only down and up just here. It's really looking at your elbow as the hinge joint. You also have another hinge joint in your knee. So if you think of your knee, your leg can move up, it can move down, it can't do anything else. So questions about the hinge joint, we need to remember our knee, and we need to actually remember which bones make up our leg. We need to remember which bones make up our arm. So we can actually discuss the hinge joint, which is in our elbow and it's in our knee. Okay, next one is condyloid joint. Now, we're going to learn all different types of joints, okay? But the condyloid joint is in the wrist, okay? Offers a good range of movement, okay? But not as good as the ball and socket. Now, learning this is good to know, so we can actually keep idea of all the joints, especially when we do our movement analysis, but it's not vitally important for your test. The main ones are ball and socket and our hinge joint. But once again, ball and socket, our condyloid joint is found in the wrist, okay, and our ankle, and it offers a good range of movement, but not as much as the ball and socket. And you can see that the wrist is here, and we're looking at this here, joint just there. Okay, the next one is the pivot joint. Now, pivot joint is also important to remember. The pivot joint is found in the neck, okay, and that's what your head sits on top. Okay, so if you think of a stick with a ball on top, that is pretty much your pivot joint. Okay, and the pivot joint allows you to move up and down and to rotate to a point. Okay, so we think about that of pretty much a stick and a head. So you think of the atlas and axis, allowing rotation of the head. The pivot joint is in your neck. Next one is the saddle joint. Now the saddle joint is in your thumb. Okay, and this allows your thumb to move in two directions. Okay, that's all the movement. So if you think about the hinge joint, up and down, saddle joint is the same, two directions. Okay, so really need to make sure, remember saddling the thumb, not vitally important to your exams, but it's good to know when we come to movement analysis. Okay, so we have different types of movement. When you move any part of your skeleton, we don't say you move your arm up, you move it down. We need to know the correct terms. Now these correct terms are here. Is abduction, adduction, extension, flexion, rotation. Okay, these are the key points, and what will be asked is, in this a question could be something like, as a runner brings his leg back at the knee, what type of movement is made. And they're there. If you bend your arm up, you're flexing it. If you're moving your leg back at the knee, we're flexing it. So flexion. So we'll quickly talk through each one. So abduction, moving away from the midline of your body. Now, if you imagine the midline cuts you straight down the middle here. Okay. So if you move away, it's arm moving out, away from this midline. It's your leg moving out, away from that midline of the body. Okay. If you think of you abduct something, so if a child is abducted, they are taken away. So that's one way to remember it. We abduct, we take it away from the midline of our body. Now, adduction, ever so slight change in the spelling, okay, is movement towards. You're bringing the arm back towards the midline of the body. So when you back to the middle, you're moving your leg back in the midline of the body. Now, extension, if you think of an extension, you make it bigger. So it's the straightening of limbs at a joint. So if I'm thinking there, I'm straightening, I'm extending my arm out as straight as it can be. So I'm moving at here and I'm extending it out as far as possible. Flexion, so if you think you go to the gym, you stand in front of that mirror and you flex your muscles, it is bringing that arm in. Okay, so that flexion is there, it's the bending of a limb at the joint. Okay, so think of flexing your arm. The next one is rotation. Now, rotation is making that circle movement. So we think about rotations, usually happen or will happen at ball and socket joints, in the shoulder, in the hip. And that's where we can offer that rotation of the shoulder going round in nice big circles. Now, we can answer a couple of questions. So we'll give a couple of minutes to each one. We can pause the video in a second and then just play it once you've done them. A couple of multiple choice questions just to get our brain working. We'll go through some more exam questions next lesson, but that is the skeletal system. What you need to do is make sure you learn the 4 functions of the skeleton. You need to make sure you know the bones, so you can actually place them in the body. We need to know the 4 classifications. We need to know what a synovial joint is. We need to know the different types of joints and the movements which are at them, so such as rotation, flexion, extension. And we need to know the spinal cord and be able to put them into 5 different areas, and make sure we understand that in each joint there is cartilage and we have that role, synovial fluid, where's that, why is that in the joint? So these are different things we need to know. If you get these, the skeletal system will be very easy to learn. Right, good luck.